because this doesn't match our values. This shouldn't have slipped through the cracks. That's the bottom line.
Migrant detention centers in the U.S. long criticized for inhumane conditions. Tonight, the Canadian pension plans under scrutiny for investing in them. CBC Toronto has learned at least 2 Canadian pension funds invested in some of the largest private prison operators in the U.S., companies that run the immigration detention centers. One of those mega pension funds is for Ontario teachers. Lauren Pelly joins us now live. Lauren, since we first broke this story this morning, a lot of people are upset by it, and some of that anger is coming directly from the people who would benefit from this pension fund, and that's teachers.
That's right. There's been quite an outcry since our story rolled out online and on radio earlier today. And that's coming from teachers both on social media and for those gathered at a conference that was held today in Ottawa. And this is tied to our finding that the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan bought more than 20,000 shares in these controversial migrant detention centers. That's an investment of around $500,000. Migrant detention centers south of the border have stirred controversy amid allegations of subpar medical care, poor living conditions, and segregation. Activists have brought their fight to the streets and right to the doorsteps of multiple facilities. Many of the sites are owned by Geo Group, and a report from the internal watchdog for U.S. Homeland Security said conditions at one of the company's California facilities may violate detainees' rights.
And that's why there was such a concern and such an uproar from members across Ontario, because this doesn't match our values.
Outcry was swift from teachers online after CBC Toronto first reported this morning the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan invested more than $500,000 in the private prison operator in the first quarter of this year. The Alberta Pension Plan, a Crown corporation, invested close to $5 million in both Geo Group and another prison operator.
The idea of having pension funds and others invested in companies that may be associated with human rights abuses is very troubling.
I think this is a time when people should be being careful about what it is that their investments are funding.
CBC News reached out to both pension plans for their response. Representatives from Alberta didn't comment, but a spokesperson for the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan said it did have shares in Geo Group, but divested them in early April. In a statement, the spokesperson said, "We regret holding exposure to this stock. Our members care deeply about human rights, and we are committed to investing responsibly." Some Ontario teachers who were gathered for a conference today in Ottawa want to make sure it's a promise that's upheld.
This shouldn't have slipped through the cracks. That's the bottom line. Even though it is a very small amount, we're talking about $500,000 in a $191 billion plan. That's very small, but it's significant because it sends a message, and teachers want to make sure that that the investments that the plan makes matches the values that we promote in the classroom every day.
This is also not the first time a Canadian organization has invested in this type of controversial investment and backed away from it. Late last year, The Guardian reported the Canadian pension plan's investment arm owned more than $10 million in shares in those 2 private prison companies. They have since sold those off. Chris?
Lauren, thanks. Now to some terrifying moments in the sky. More than 30 passengers suffered injuries on an Air Canada flight from Toronto to Australia. Severe turbulence forced the flight to make an emergency landing in Hawaii. Mike Wise is following the story for us and joins us now live. Mike.
Oh, Chris, Air Canada ended up confirming 35 passengers received minor injuries. That's actually up from what was initially reported. That's because once the flight arrived in Honolulu, emergency crews checked out the passengers, actually had to send them to several local hospitals. There were just too many to go to one location. Now, I want to show you a map of the flight. This is an Air Canada flight AC-33, originally from Toronto en route from Vancouver to Sydney. At some point past Hawaii, it hit some severe turbulence, people thrown from their seats. After some doctors and nurses that happened to be on the flight checked out the passengers, the air crew made the decision to return and land in Honolulu. Now, we have some pictures that passengers posted to social media, many of them even saying even some crew members hitting their heads on the ceiling. Many say this drop came out of nowhere.
The seatbelt signs weren't on. We had no indication that anything was going to happen. There wasn't even a rumble in the plane, and then just dropped.
We hit turbulence and we all hit the roof and everything fell down. And stuff, so people went flying.
The lady in front of me flew right out of her seat. She said she had her seatbelt on, so it's possible that in the turbulence that released and she flew up and hit her head. I tried to grab her and hold her down.
I was quite terrifying, to be honest, because you think, you just think, oh wow, what's going on right now? It's very terrifying. And I've experienced turbulence before, but it's quite intense turbulence, to be honest.
Now, the passengers are praising how the Air Canada crew handled this, checking on those who were injured and making the decision to return the flight around and attend to the injuries. Now, Air Canada says it is arranging hotels for all of those passengers until it can arrange a new flight to Sydney. Chris?
A successful ending to an Amber Alert that probably woke you up last night. A 70-year-old man and his 2 grandsons were found safe.
We had a missing vulnerable person with 2 grandchildren, also very vulnerable at ages 2 and 4, with no idea where they were. So our concern is, as time went on, this became more of a case where we're concerned about their safety and well-being, which is why eventually it met that threshold for the OPP to issue that Amber Alert.
An hour and a half after that overnight alert was called, they were found in Toronto. York Regional Police say despite the obvious importance of an Amber Alert, once again, their phones were flooded with calls from people angry about being woken up.
There was an early wake-up call for a lot of people, I'm sure, around 3 o'clock in the morning, and we apologize for the inconvenience, but when there's kids at risk and their safety at risk, we pull out all the stops. And this is just one of the tools that was being used to bring a successful completion to this investigation.
And now to that tragic news from Oakville we first reported last night. A child pulled from a backyard pool is now in stable condition. The 4-year-old girl and her 79-year-old grandmother were both found unconscious in the water Wednesday afternoon. Emergency crews tried to revive the grandmother, but she died at the scene. The coroner will investigate to determine if a medical incident contributed to the woman's death. Back here in Toronto, Canadian rock star Jacob Hogarth wants his sex assault case to go before a jury. The Headley singer made that request at a preliminary hearing today at Old City Hall Courthouse.
Do you have any comments on the allegations? Do you have any comments on the allegations?
Not saying much, Hogarth pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of sexual assault causing bodily harm and 1 count of sexual interference. Police say the charges relate to incidents in Toronto involving a woman and a girl under the age of 16. Today was the first of a 2-day hearing to decide whether the case goes to trial. The allegations prompted Headley to go on an indefinite hiatus. Now to an active investigation. Police say these men were in an elevator with a 19-year-old woman early yesterday morning in the King and Bathurst area and tried to rob her of her phone. That's when one of the men pulled out a gun. The woman was then violently dragged from the elevator and sexually assaulted by both men in a stairwell. After, police say the men went to the underground parking garage and fled in this vehicle, a gray or silver 4-door Mazda with damage to the rear passenger's side bumper. Anyone who knows these men is asked to call police. And this video raised some tough questions last year. It shows a young black man screaming as he's pinned down by 3 transit officers. The incident happened early in 2018, and the TTC said they looked into it. But now Toronto's Ombudsman Susan Opler is slamming their investigation. Lorenda Redekop has more on her findings.
The incident was caught on video, shot by another TTC passenger. That's Reese Maxwell Crawford, a young black man, on the ground. The TTC's investigation found the only area of misconduct was when one fare inspector smiles during a tense interaction. It also accepted the account of one fare inspector that before the takedown, Maxwell Crawford stared at him for a prolonged period of time. Susan Opler is Toronto's ombudsman. She says that's not the case watching the video, one of several discrepancies she found in the TTC report.
The first fare inspector, as well as an independent witness, said that they felt uncomfortable because this young man had his hands in his pockets, and they feared that he might have a weapon. In fact, he does not have his hands in his pockets at any point on the video.
Maxwell Crawford's lawyer says the report backs up his argument that the TTC's investigation was a cover-up for its staff.
Taking the evidence of someone who's contradicted by the videotape evidence as if it were a fact. And it's profoundly disturbing. And especially when that stuff relates to the issue of whether there was racial profiling happening here.
One of the fare inspectors involved that day no longer works at the TTC. The two others do. The transit agency says it accepts all 6 of the Ombudsman's recommendations and that it's going further by starting an anti-racism task force.
I have a zero tolerance for racism within the organization. All right, just the perception, the concern of the public of racism really is troubling to me personally and professionally. No one should feel uncomfortable. We want everyone to feel safe.
As for how Maxwell Crawford is now, more than a year later,
he's trying to recover from the injuries that he sustained in this, and he still struggles with a lack of trust with respect to law enforcement and even the TTC. So it's an ongoing problem.
He's continuing with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the TTC and police. Lorenda Redicop, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's get Nick Cernovich into the mix now. And Nick, I was down at the Honda Indy today getting things ready. We did a lap around the racetrack, and it was nice there for a while, but as soon as we left, the rain just poured down.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all being fueled by this heat and humidity in the air. That's kind of the fuel for this stuff, and then you need a trigger, and that trigger was a cold front. So with all of that, there's a lot to talk about here. I'm going to start with the watches that remain. There were watches and warnings across the GTA. The only thing we have left is a few severe thunderstorm watches down around the Niagara region and then further east as well, just east of Pickering, Ajax, Oshawa areas. So for the GTA, we're pretty much done with this at this point. The rain showers had moved through, but heavy at times, especially out toward the Oakville area and then also out toward Oshawa as well. Behind it, just a little bit of cloud cover, but otherwise pretty clear. So that was one part of the story. The other part of the story was the heat, and the heat was fueling some of these thunderstorms. There are heat warnings in effect down in southwestern Ontario and eastern Ontario. For us, though, didn't quite make that criteria, but nonetheless, we hit about 39 with the Humidex today. Right now, we're sitting at 26 degrees, off of 30 as our high. The Humidex right now feels like 33, although earlier it was closer to 40. And things are going to stay that way for about the next 24 hours. Tomorrow, Humidex of 32, high of 28 degrees, but we get that humidity back, and we've got some very warm temperatures to talk about. Full details in a bit.
All right, we'll see you in a bit. Turning now to the nation's capital, and Ottawa's most famous comedian is not laughing over a hotel renovation mega project.
When people see a picture of that part of the city, Americans, people from around the world who've never been here, they think, wow, I got to go there. You know, if you block things, if you start messing around with things too much, you start to lose a little bit of the impact of what we already have here, which is an incredible looking place.
Tom Green was at Ottawa City Hall today to try to stop an addition to the Chateau Laurier Hotel. But City Council has decided to go ahead with the plan. This afternoon, councillors upheld a decision allowing the changes. That effectively ends a 3-year ordeal that pitted the hotel's owners and their architects against members of the public who feel the design doesn't fit with the original structure. The construction of pipelines and how to fight climate change continues to divide the nation. Canada's premiers did agree on at least one thing today. They vowed to get answers from federal party leaders at an annual conference in Saskatoon. That's where we find our David Cochran tonight.
It's easy to get everyone together for the cameras, harder to get them together on big issues such as climate change.
It's real, and the voting public will be deciding. This is a hot-button issue, and every region and every territory, every province needs to have a comprehensive plan.
5 provinces have complied with Ottawa's climate plan. 5 others oppose it, with several taking it to court. While they litigate, territorial premiers deal with the impacts firsthand in the Arctic.
I think we see it as an important job for us is to educate people in the South that that their actions are having a big effect on us.
It's a blunt reminder at a conference where there has been a lot of talk about pipelines, another big fracture point that pits British Columbia and Quebec against all of the provinces in between.
It's true, it's one of the points on which we disagree, so we agree to disagree on this point.
Where the premiers did agree is on a letter-writing campaign to all federal leaders in the run-up to the election, asking them dozens of detailed questions on everything from jobs to health care to Arctic sovereignty.
So to each of the federal leaders, I encourage you to review this letter sent on behalf of this nation's 13 premiers, a nation that is waiting for your response.
Maybe so, but at least one premier has made up his mind.
Justin Trudeau has failed this country.
David Cochran, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Millions of people have been taking to the streets in Hong Kong since April to protest a controversial extradition law, and support around the world, including right here in Toronto, is growing. I'm Kelda Yoon outside Union Station. Coming up, I'll tell you what this group behind me is doing to show their solidarity.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
In the U.S., the state of Louisiana is bracing for the arrival of Tropical Storm Barry. It could make landfall as a hurricane this weekend. And in New Orleans, the mayor says she's worried more about the rain Barry is bringing than the winds.
We do expect that this storm will be slow moving. What that means is that there is a possibility, as it's moving slow, that we're going to get heavy rainfall for up to 48 hours, it could be.
Up to a half a meter of rain is expected in some areas. That's a big problem for waterlogged New Orleans, which is already struggling with flooded streets. Officials are worried about flash flooding, too. The storm surge could also prevent water from emptying from the already swollen Mississippi River. Several low-lying communities in coastal Louisiana are also under evacuation orders. Now to the latest in escalating tensions near the Persian Gulf between the United Kingdom and Iran, this time involving a British oil tanker and 3 Iranian vessels that tried to block it. Chris O'Neill Yates walks us through what happened.
The British are saying that Iran has flouted international law after 3 Iranian vessels attempted to block the passage of the BP oil tanker British Heritage through the Strait of Hormuz. A statement released by the Ministry of Defense this morning says HMS Montrose was forced to position herself between the Iranian vessels and British Heritage and issue verbal warnings to the Iranian vessels, which then turned away. We are concerned by this action and continue to urge the Iranian authorities to de-escalate the situation in the region. The Iranian boats, the British say, belong to the Revolutionary Guard. In what officials are describing as a fairly dramatic scene, guns on the HMS Montrose were trained on the vessels and they ordered them through radio contact to move away. The Iranians are, of course, denying all this, any claims they tried to seize a British tanker. They say they've had no confrontations with any tankers, any vessels at all in the last 24 hours. Foreign Minister Mohammed Javad Zarif claims that this is just the UK trying to create tensions. Now, tensions have been ratcheted up in the Gulf since President Donald Trump tightened the noose on Iran when he pulled out of the 2015 nuclear agreement. In recent months, several tankers have been attacked. Just last week, British soldiers boarded an Iranian vessel off the coast of Gibraltar. It said it had evidence it was carrying Iranian crude to Syria that would have been in breach of EU sanctions. Britain blamed the Iranian regime for attacks on 2 tankers back in June. Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt of the UK says they are monitoring all of this very closely.
Obviously very concerning developments, but also I'm very proud of the Royal Navy and the role that they played in keeping British assets, British shipping safe. We are continuing to monitor the situation very, very carefully. We are constantly monitoring the security and constantly keeping under review the kind of security that we need to keep British shipping safe.
Iran is in a tough spot economically right now. These sanctions imposed by the U.S. and the EU mean they can't sell their oil on the international market. Trump has warned that more sanctions, substantially increased sanctions, are coming, so tensions may just escalate in the Gulf as Iran gets even more desperate. Chris O'Neill Yates, CBC News, London.
After years imprisoned in Indonesia, Canadian teacher Neil Bantelman was finally returned home. Bantelman first went to prison in 2014, convicted of sexually assaulting young students at the Jakarta International School, or Intercultural School. Over the years, Bantelman maintained his innocence. An investigation by the Fifth Estate found that critical pieces of the evidence used to convict him were seriously flawed. Bantelman's conviction was overturned in 2015 before being reinstated by Indonesia's Supreme Court 6 months later. The Canadian government had been lobbying for his release. A source with direct knowledge of the case tells CBC News Bantelman has been home for more than a week. The streets of Hong Kong have been overflowing with protesters for months now. They're pushing back against a bill that would allow for extradition to the Chinese mainland. Here in Toronto, supporters are showing their solidarity at Union Station today, and that's where our Kelda Yoon is for us tonight. And Kelda, the supporters there are building a symbolic wall.
That's right, Chris. They've built a symbolic Lenin wall, asking people walking by Union Station here today to take a post-it and write their own message of support to those in Hong Kong. As we know, as you said, overflowed with protesters over the past month and a half, sometimes violent protests over this extradition law. So they're also handing out flyers, trying to educate more people about exactly what's going on. Now, I have here with me one of the organizers of today's protest, Kenny Yu. Kenny, what motivated you to have this protest and to erect this wall here today?
I feel, first of all, I see Hong Kong has got a very hard days, harsh days here. So I just want to raise the awareness of the world, because not the world, but at least Toronto society, because I think only the world can help Hong Kong, really. So I am just the organizer, or I'm just basically the coordinator, but you see actually all other people are contributing their words to show their support to Hong Kong.
Many people from the Hong Kong community here today, and we've seen also outside the Hong Kong community, people stopping by, writing their little post-its of support. Now, we know that a couple days ago, Chief Executive of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam, she said the bill is, in her words, dead. But even though she said that, we're still seeing massive protests in Hong Kong. You're here today still protesting this proposed bill, even though she said it's now dead. Why do you think it's still important to protest?
I think the simplest thing is, first of all, I don't know how the world perceives that, but I think what Carrie Lam says the bill is that is totally a load of rubbish, actually. So I guess if she really wants to, if she really wants to cancel the bill or to withdraw the bill, this is something that is to be done very officially, which means so now the bill is in the Legislative Council. You need to put it back into the Legislative Council and have everybody be, into the discussion and cancel the bill officially, put down in the Legislative Council's meeting minutes, to make it really be officially withdrawn or cancelled.
And until that is done, you won't be satisfied?
Of course not. I don't think, Hong Kong is a rule of law, a city of rule of law, right? Yep.
Yeah. And thank you, Kenny.
No problem.
And this, they're here today. They will be back here tomorrow, and they're asking people in the Hong Kong community here in Toronto and outside of the community to come here to show their support. They'll be back here tomorrow at 5 o'clock, erecting this wall once again. Send it back to you, Chris.
All right, Kelda, thanks.
An expansion to Toronto's bike share program means a much larger coverage area, more than 1,200 new bikes, and 105 new docking stations. I'm Greg Ross. I'll have details coming up.
I was surprised when I saw that they were on wrestling mats instead of cars.
At the nearly 80-degree drop.
Why not? Why do you think that is?
It's hard to imagine it can get any better than that.
You'll soon be seeing a lot more of those City of Toronto bikes around town. The bike share program is set for a major expansion, one that will see thousands of bikes and hundreds of docking stations added to the network. Greg Ross has the details.
This is an important part of our public transportation system.
The mayor was in the East End today to announce the latest expansion to Toronto's bike share program. They're adding more than 1,200 new bikes and 105 new docking stations. The mayor says it's necessary to meet the growing demand.
Ridership has grown to more than 2 million rides per year.
Also growing is the program's coverage area. This new expansion means you can now pick up a bike as far east as Victoria Park Avenue to as far as Humber Bay Park in the west. There are also stations as far north as Yonge and Lawrence. Welcome news for Stephen Ron, who lives in the Beaches. He tried the bike share program for the first time today.
I just live right around the corner, so I came from downtown.
One thing that hasn't changed is the length of a single trip. Riders are still expected to check in every half hour. Ron didn't check in. It ended up costing him an extra $4.
Maybe they should look at that. You know, make it, because a half an hour it doesn't get you downtown.
Some people might wonder why you have to check in every 30 minutes. Why is that?
Yeah, well, it's really important that our ridership, when they want to take a bike out, that a bike is available.
It's more about getting from point A to point B.
That's exactly it. We want people to be able to take a ride when they need to. For $4, you can keep it out longer, but again, you know, the overall price is very low.
The mayor says it's all about complementing the city's public transportation.
Many of the new Bike Share Toronto locations will be near TTC subway stations because we want to encourage people to use this as part of the last mile and as part of encouraging people not just to use bikes to get around the city, but also to use the public transit system as well.
The latest expansion brings the total number of bikes in the program up to 5,000. Another expansion is planned for next year, where they're hoping to get that number to 6,000. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Former Councillor Giorgio Mammoliti is asking the city for more than $25,000 to help cover legal costs related to a code of conduct investigation over a CBC Toronto story. Here's a little background to the case. So it all involves this piece of land in the Highway 400 and Finch area in the ward Mammoliti represented. Last year, CBC Toronto obtained a secret report that showed Mammoliti and executives at the Toronto Parking Authority pushed hard for a deal that would have seen the public overpay for the land by more than $2 million. The report included claims that Mammoliti made, quote, direct express threats to city staff. That sparked a code of conduct investigation into Mammoliti's actions. It did not find evidence he broke council rules. The city allows councillors to be reimbursed $20,000 for legal fees, but Mammoliti's lawyers say the total cost was more than 25 grand higher. They say Mammoliti is entitled to further reimbursement because the length of the investigation, quote, interfered in the 2018 municipal election and contributed to Mr. Mammoliti's electoral defeat, loss of income, and loss of eligibility for a full pension. City Council will take a look at all of this next week. A Burlington man is racing against time to prove that he is a Canadian. His Canadian-issued birth certificate will not do the trick. Angelina King explains why.
You have to go to the Department of National
Serge Curry was born in Germany in 1966. His parents were serving in the Canadian Air Force. When he was 1, they moved back to Canada. He's been here ever since. Curry found his birth certificate doesn't actually prove his citizenship when he tried renewing his health card 2 years ago.
I plopped this on the table and she goes, "What is this?" And I go, "That's my birth certificate." "You want a driver's license, birth certificate?" "This ain't no birth certificate."
Curry has a Department of National Defense birth certificate. Canada issued them between 1963 and 1979. All it's good for is proving his age.
This has been like super stressful for me. I'm close to a nervous breakdown.
For the past 2 years, he's been trying to get his proof of Canadian citizenship. Curry says it took months before he could even figure out that's what he needed. He didn't hear anything for months after he applied. Turns out the documents were sent. He never got them.
"Can you reissue it?" And they said, "No, you didn't call us back in time."
Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada says that's because it had been more than 180 days. 3 months ago, he applied again. It's being processed, but the clock is ticking.
If I don't have a health card, I can't get my medicine.
Curry is diabetic. His health card expires next month. He needs his proof of citizenship to renew it. In a statement, IRCC says in part, given that current processing times for proof of application is 5 months, this application is within established processing times.
An immigration lawyer we spoke with says while he's never dealt with a case like this one before, he's not surprised because he says there's a lot of different types of birth certificates out there and delays in a process like this one are quite common.
They're not handing these out willy-nilly. They want to be sure before they give it. But, you know, it's a government, it's a bureaucracy, mistakes are made, and things take time.
He advises Canadian parents to get proof of citizenship right away if a child is born abroad. Curry wants others to learn from him.
I'm hoping someone else can just go, wow, I have that card. I better do something before I'm in trouble.
He hopes to have all of his documents in September. Then he can apply for his first Canadian passport and celebrate his official citizenship by relaxing in Hawaii. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
Because this is no longer valid.
Yes, the Roar on the Lakeshore is this weekend, and no, that goofy guy is not one of the racers, but I did get a chance to take a lap around the track. We'll have that coming up for you later in the show, plus an interview with the one Canadian who has a real shot at winning the Honda Indy. Nick's back now, and Nick, I was in this fire suit that was definitely as hot as it looked.
Chris, you know what? I have no sympathy because right now I've never been more jealous of your job. That's pretty awesome that you got a chance to go out there and go around the racetrack with you, but I can imagine it was pretty brutally hot. Humidex values hitting about 39 today in the city of Toronto. Bit of relief, though, with the rain that came through, and now we're looking at drier weather moving through. And that's actually our first headline. Drier weather for tonight, but the humidity returns for the weekend and next week as well. Lots of sunshine, though, in the forecast. That's the good news there. Here's a look at current temperatures. 26 degrees, though. We did hit 30 degrees just prior to the rain and then after the rain as well, but drier weather in behind that rainfall. In fact, the Humidex, which was about 39, pushing 40, now at 31. So drier air, you're going to feel a bit of relief for tonight. But a bit of a roller coaster ride when it comes to the Humidex over the next few days. We're looking at about 32 tomorrow, then it goes up again to about 35 for Saturday, drops on Sunday, and then I think Tuesday is going to be the muggiest of the days, both the temperature but also the humidity really rising. Humidex value on Tuesday likely to exceed 40. Now, I mentioned earlier we had those severe thunderstorm watches in effect. That's now being dropped around the Niagara region. Any scattered showers and thunderstorms off to the east of us at this point. Forecast-wise, bit of cloud cover for tonight. By the time we hit tomorrow afternoon, though, we're into the sunshine again. Temperatures rise, but drier weather in the forecast. It's not until Saturday where a few spotty showers will roll through, maybe a rumble of thunder, but really it's not going to be a big dragged-out event. It's pretty short-lived spotty showers for Saturday. Forecast for tonight, temperatures around 16, 17 degrees. By tomorrow, we're looking at highs of about 28, but you're going to notice the humidity is lower, 31, 32 with the Humidex. Saturday, the risk for thunder showers. Don't let that scare you off, though. It should be pretty sunny. Lots of sunshine and warm weather in the forecast.
Chris. All right, sounds good. Thanks, Nick.
You bet.
You know I like it when your body goes bump, bump, bump. Come on, don't stop. Let's go. Come on.
You might want to break out your white Air Force Ones if you have plans to go to OVO Fest. Drake is bringing back the early 2000s with the festival lineup. B2K, Mario, Chingy, the Yin Yang Twins are all set to perform at the Budweiser stage on August 4th. And oh yeah, Drake, he'll be there too. He's headlining, of course, on the 5th. Tickets go on sale tomorrow. Apologies with this next story if you haven't eaten dinner yet. Kebab rolls are common in some parts of Pakistan and Dubai. Now they're making their mark right here in the GTA. And as we head to break, Metro Morning food guide Suresh Das takes us to Ajax, to a family-run restaurant serving up the street food.
My favorite way to have the kebabs is definitely in the roll. Adds a lot more flavor, a lot more textures. Hi, my name is Syed Qadri. I'm part of the family that owns La Roche, and we're located in Ajax. Our concept is fresh, fast Indian food, and it's kind of like a mix of Pakistani and Indian food that we inherited from our family. On the menu, our two most popular items are the biryani and the kebab rolls. A kebab roll is a wrap. It's made in the fresh paratha that we make here. It's a type of flatbread. And then we grill the kebab fresh to order and add our toppings and sauces. Kebab is traditional to India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, a lot of other countries as well. We kind of make ours different by adding a lot more spices, a lot more flavors than other places do.
A California gym has come up with an environmentalist's dream workout. The calories you burn produce enough electricity to run the building. Here's how it works.
This is Sacramento Eco Fitness. What sets us apart from every other gym is our cardio equipment. And as you see behind me, I have somebody right now exercising, but while they're exercising and burning calories, they're actually able to produce watts, which we use that energy to power the facility itself. So right now, currently, he's producing 298 watts, and then 49 of those watts are going to the grid. On average, you'll at least produce 20 watts, with a 20-minute workout. So 1 watt per minute if you're just going the basic resistance. But if you want to kick it up a notch, you can honestly make anywhere close to 50 watts in those 20 minutes.
Combining fitness and something that's, of course, really good for you and the environment is just probably one of the best ideas that anybody could ever come up with.
I think it's something that doesn't take anything extra, and people are already using this equipment, so why not?
They walk away knowing that they're doing something good for the global community, right? Not just for themselves, but for the world.
It's surreal to be in that particular building. There are Rembrandts in the next room, and there will be my painting.
Side by side with a legend of art, a Canadian's work will soon be honored as part of an exhibit remembering Rembrandt. And there's a familial connection as well. We'll explain after the break. A Canadian artist's work is in exalted company. His painting is part of an international exhibit in Amsterdam honoring the enduring legacy of Rembrandt. Sandra Abma has more.
You're here when you're applying it.
Michael Goodson leans over one of the giant portraits that line his Ottawa studio. He's explaining the painstaking techniques he employs to bring his faces to life. Goodson is a big fan of the magic Rembrandt created on his canvases.
It's not just the illusion of three-dimensionality by painting shadows and light, but also using the texture of the paint to create the illusion of a texture of a human face as if it were actually coming out of the canvas.
Last year, Goodson started a portrait of his father in the same style. He called it Baroque Dad. The honest, unvarnished portrait of the lined and aged face is reminiscent of Rembrandt's own unflinching self-portraits. Goodson says his father was the perfect subject.
He's not vain at all. He's quite happy to let me paint him as he is and not sort of pretty it up. And that's exactly what I wanted to do, was to learn, from the texture.
Baroque Dad has been chosen from more than 8,000 artworks submitted from around the world to be shown in Long Live Rembrandt at the Rijksmuseum. The exhibition is part of the museum's year-long commemoration of the 350th anniversary of the artist's death. Goodson says he can hardly believe it.
It's surreal to be in that particular building. There are Rembrandts in the next room, and there will be my painting.
July 15th is Rembrandt's birthday, and that's when Michael Goodson's dad will have his premiere at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Sandra Abma, CBC News, Ottawa.
Gearing up at the Honda Indy. Yes, it is hot in these suits, but it's also worth it. I'll take a rip around the racetrack in one of these cars, and you will get to hear directly from James Hinchcliffe, Canada's best chance this weekend as we head into the Honda Indy. We'll be right back. The Honda Indy races into Toronto this weekend, and Canada's best shot at a win is superstar racer James Hinchcliffe. I spoke with him earlier today, but first, we wanted to get a sense of the adrenaline-fueled sport he loves. Ready to drive.
It's a little loud.
It's a little loud, it's a little loud. So how many times has this head sock been used before me?
Millions, but it gets washed every time.
Oh, good. Thanks, buddy.
There you go. Bend your knees and slide on down.
Okay. Don't kick the back of the seat.
You can kick and tell them go faster, right?
Oh, God. Here we go. Oh, shoot. Pretty great. Let's do it again. Well, we were talking beforehand. What is the physicality that it takes to be a race car driver? Because you're sitting. So for a lot of people that might be watching, they're not thinking it takes, but you're a fit guy. A lot of the racers that we see are. What kind of physicality does it take to actually do a race?
We create so many G-forces in the corner that your body is subjected to a tremendous amount of force, and that's just going through one corner of one lap. And here we've got 11 corners, we're going to do 90 laps. And so you're working very hard. We don't have power steering. So you're wrestling this car around a road, especially the bumpy street circuits like here in Toronto. Every bump you hit, the wheel's trying to rip out of your hands. You've got to keep it in control. And again, you're doing that while it's, 26, 7, 8 degrees with, it's Toronto in July, 80% humidity.
I know.
So your heart rate's up, you're losing a lot of water weight, you got to stay hydrated. Your cardio has to be that of like a marathon runner because we're going for almost 2 straight hours.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a very, very physical sport.
What is it like for you to be back home, to be competing here in the city?
For me, it's the coolest opportunity. I'm so fortunate that, not only do I get to race in my home country, which a lot of the guys on the circuit don't. If you're not American or Canadian, we don't even go to your country. We literally go to my backyard. My soon-to-be wife and I have a place 5-minute walk from here, and I grew up 20 minutes down the road, and I came to this race all the time as a kid. It's really what made me fall in love with IndyCar racing and want to do this for a living. So to get to come back here every year and to get to now be on the other side of the fence putting on the show for other people, it's just incredible.
Take me back to when you were a kid on those bleachers. What do you remember about those moments?
I just remember being floored at the speed of the cars, the sound of the cars. I used to watch them hurtle around the corner and think, there's a person in that controlling that. Like, it just blew my mind as a kid, and getting to get so close to the cars, so close to the drivers, that's one of the things that IndyCar really prides itself on, is the access that they give the fans. And it had a huge effect on me as a kid. It made a lifelong fan out of me, just knowing I could stand this close to an IndyCar as it's rolling to the grid, and chasing Mario Andretti trying to get an autograph. So it was, I got so many memories from this place as a kid.
Now, the other thing that we obviously know watching is how dangerous it can be as well. I know you've had a bad crash. What fuels you up? What keeps you going behind the wheel despite the danger?
I think all of us, I make the joke that racing drivers are just wired wrong. We're missing that self-preservation gene that most people have.
I think you're wired right, probably.
Right for very specific things.
Right.
But no, we all understand there are obviously dangers to our sport. There are risks that we take, and we take them willingly. It's a combination of the thrill you get driving one of the fastest cars on earth at the absolute limit, combined with the adrenaline you get from competition.
And I know that Indy has done a lot of work to make the cockpit safer. What do you think the future of safety in racing is going to look like?
IndyCar really has been at the forefront of a lot of the safety innovations that we now see across motorsports globally, and that's not slowing down. In fact, we announced in May that we are introducing a windscreen to the cars for 2020. It's going to be kind of like the halo concept that Formula One's adopted, plus a windscreen to stop smaller debris getting through. So It's really the first solution that's fully protected a driver's head, which is kind of our most vulnerable part in the current condition.
Does that take away from the sport and the ability to get around the track faster?
No, it really shouldn't have much effect on the performance of the car at all. There are going to be certain differences, obviously. Now, we'll have to deal with things like buffeting. There's going to be some venting issues that we've got to get through. But those are all relatively small problems that we have to solve when it comes to the fact the big problem that we're really solving is driver safety.
This sport is dominated so much by Americans, Europeans. How does it feel to be a Canadian and kind of representing this sport for a whole country. How's that feel?
Yeah, I mean, I put a tremendous amount of pressure on myself to do well for Canada. I'm a very proud Canadian.
You're the Raptors of racing.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. The Jays, the Raptors, we're the only one, you know. And it's a huge honor, obviously, to be able to represent my country like that. And the support that I felt from back home has just been incredible since day one. But because of that support, I want to give them something to cheer for, you know. Canadians really get behind their athletes, and we love performing and really giving them a reason to cheer and support. And we've had a good run here in town the last couple seasons, but man, a win here in Toronto would just be, I mean, next to winning the Indy 500, it'd be like right there.
Well, and it's been a while since there's been a win from a Canadian. 2003, Paul Tracy, last time a Canadian's won this. You know, are you seeing momentum? Are you feeling that building?
The last street course that we went to, which is the most comparable to Toronto, was in Detroit. We were running for the lead. We were essentially leading the race when we got taken out. So we were running up front there. We've had good cars here the last few years. You look at those things, combine them all.
Right.
There's good possibility this could be a good weekend for us. But the NTT IndyCar Series is so competitive. I mean, week in and week out, if you miss it by just a tiny little bit, you're going to be way off because it's just so competitive. So we're going to keep doing everything that we do. We're going to hope that it's a strong weekend for us. And, you know, there's every reason to believe we're going to be fighting for the front.
Great. Well, good luck. You've got a whole country cheering you on.
Thank you so much.
And I can't wait to see how you do this weekend.
Appreciate it.
So when we were ripping around the racetrack, guess how fast we were going?
How fast?
I found out just after 275 kilometers an hour.
Wow. Now, can you feel it? Like when you're in the... Does it feel like that? Or?
I felt like I was a part of the machine because they really strap you down and you're not moving too much. You can barely move your head, but boy, was it going fast.
You're just like on a rocket.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
How will the weather be for the Indy this weekend? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, well, so Saturday is the only one where we're looking at maybe a few spotty showers, but they'll be short-lived, if anything. Lots of sunshine in the forecast. Tomorrow we got sunshine, 28 degrees. Saturday is going to be a humid one, though. Sunday, less in the way of humidity, but we've got lots in the way of sunshine.
All right, well, that sounds great. And that is our show for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. Mike Wise is up next at 11.